Which camera am I looking at?
This one. This one.
Oh, right here. Okay. Welcome to Books That Matter, People Who Matter, the program dedicated to promoting reading among all segments of the viewing audience. I'm your host, Leroy Baylor, thankful to the Most High for blessing us with another day to be with you and you to be with us. Today's program is going to be a review of a slice of American history taking place in the good old New York, New York, and coming to you by way of Broadway and Harlem. We're talking about a young man in the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 1930s, who was one of the greatest and most important choreographers, directors, and producers in the entertainment field. His name is Leonard Harper, and we have as our guest his grandson, Grant Reed Harper. Welcome to Books That Matter, People Who Matter.
It's my honor to be on the show with you, Brother Leroy.
Let's talk about your dad and the significance of this book, Rhythm for Sale.
Well, I started off doing research at the County Cullen Library in the Schaumburg and looking at the old newspapers and all of the texts. And then I decided to self-publish my book based upon my research. And it took several editions for me to get it to where it is now, but it's like almost perfect. I didn't know my grandfather. I never met him. I didn't know what he looked like. So this was my way of spending over 20 years getting to know him and getting to know his spirit. Mm-hmm. And as I was doing such a deep research at the Schaumburg that the security guards would turn the lights on and off to tell me to leave. Mm-hmm. But it was so, I was looking at the microfiche and almost like I was so tired, I was almost hallucinating. And I was reading about the people that worked with my grandfather that were forgotten. And it was like they were saying to me, it's not just your grandfather's story, it's our stories too. Mm-hmm. Please respect what we went through. Mm-hmm. And his heyday was during the Jazz Age and the Harlem Renaissance. And a lot of those books that I read when I was doing the research were basically saying blacks in Harlem were singing and dancing for tips, and they were happy getting the tips. I wanted to show the good and the bad, and these were human beings just like we are, and they had all of the multi-dimensions. So like when they talk about the Cotton Club, they say, well, Duke Ellington performed there, Lena Horne performed there. They don't write about how they were not allowed to use the toilet facilities. Mm. So they would have to go on the sidewalk on Lenox Avenue and bring their own brown bags, and they were on their own. And that was a part of the racism.
In Harlem.
In Harlem.
Okay, let's go back. What led you to doing research on your grandfather? What was it?
Okay, it was by chance. I worked in the film industry for about over 30 years, and I worked on Do the Right Thing with Spike Lee, and I wanted to get a record. He wrote a book with Leroy Jones's daughter about the making of Do the Right Thing, and on one page it said that he had to meet with me and Robert De Niro. And I wanted to make a copy of that page for myself, for my own records. As I was leaving the County Cullen Library, I saw a Harlem Renaissance book on the librarian's desk, and it was like a Harlem Renaissance dictionary. Mm-hmm. And one paragraph, I said, let me see if they have my grandfather. His first name was spelled wrong. It was like Leon Harper. But the paragraph seemed like it could have been my grandfather. And on the bottom it said BB. And the librarian says, you need to go around the block to the Schaumburg and get blacks in blackface. I went around to the Schaumburg, I got blacks in blackface. It spelled my grandfather's name properly, Leonard Harper, and it was 8 pages. Then I started doing all the research on the text. Then I went down to this senior citizen's house, one of my friend's aunts in the village, and she was walking around the kitchen. I said, with a lot of soul, even though she was a senior citizen, I said, were you a dancer? And she told me, yeah, I was in a group called Salt and Pepper, not the hip-hop one. Mm-hmm. And then I told her my grandfather's name, and she said, we used to dance for your grandfather at the Apollo. And she said, you need to go back to the Schaumburg and get on those microfiche, because all the black newspapers wrote about all of us back then. And that's when my deep research started coming. And I cross-checked everything. Like, my grandfather did a show called Plantation Days at the Lafayette Theater. It went to England. George Gershwin went with him, and J.P. Johnson was his musical conductor. And George Gershwin was doing the show that sandwiched my grandfather's show, Plantation Days. George Gershwin did The Rainbow. They hated him because he was white, because it was right after World War I, and they felt he was taking away British theatrical people's jobs. They hated my grandfather and his entire troupe because they were Americans, plus they were black. So they got a lot of hatred when they were doing the shows. But a strange thing happened. Between the first night of the show, the King's wardrobe supervisor niece was in The Rainbow, the white show. So Queen Mary brought all the royals to see the show, and they loved jazz anyway, secretly. They would be sneaking out and going to the Criterion Guild from Buckingham Palace. So when the royals clapped and gave it the approval, that's when everybody else gave the approval.
Now, as you do this research, you come across names that are saying to you, in effect, look, it's not about your grandfather only, it's about us.
Yes.
Talk about that feeling. Talk about how that connection was made.
Well, I personally experienced a lot of racism in the motion picture industry. And today you do not see that many black people in production supervisory jobs or department head jobs. There's a reason for that. Most of the people that moved up and got those jobs have purposely kept blacks out. They like to look at us as infantiles. They give us jobs parking cars, getting potato chips and sodas and doing security. But once you start thinking, they get scared. And if you do a good job, they really get scared. And they have cut black people out for years. All you have to do, there's a thing called IMDb, Internet Movie Database. You'll see all of these shows from the time these people started to now. And you look at the names of the people that were the department heads and the production supervisors, 99% of them are white. I've seen a lot of people before me and after me that were very talented, but they can't get those positions because of the racism, and it's hidden and nobody talks about it. So that experience helped me, it sensitized me towards my grandfather's people's experience. Like, he worked at Connie's Inn. That was his main, he was the in-house producer at Connie's Inn. They were less racist than the Cotton Club, because Cotton Club would outright steal people's ideas and they couldn't do anything about it. Connie's Inn, they gave my grandfather a little bit more freedom. But what happened was all the hoity-toity white people that would come in there, the rich people from Park Avenue, after a while they started complaining that they didn't want to be rubbing elbows and up too close with the darker skinned people. So they forced my grandfather to change his chorus line and make them light-skinned and nearly white because they felt more comfortable. They couldn't do anything about Bojangles and Ethel Waters' skin complexion. They were headliners. But they were able to get him to take out the darker-skinned women from the chorus lines because they felt more comfortable with light-skinned women.
Okay. In reading your book, Rhythm for Sale, I experienced it as the writer, you, being there or having been told. But you've gotten the majority of this from the research.
Well, I got a lot of it from I knew my grandmother's friends that were in show business, but she
grandmother's friends.
My grandmother's friends, because she tried to be in show business, but it didn't work out, and she didn't marry my grandfather. He was married. His wife lived 2 blocks away, so she didn't want to talk about it, because back then she had my mother out of wedlock, and they're very strong with the church. So when I came around, she didn't want to talk about it. But I was around all of her show business friends. Like when I worked on the Cotton Club movie for Francis Coppola, when I went out to Astoria Studios, Norma Jean Darden was one of the technical researchers, and she knew my family, so she brought me into that particular day. They had all the senior citizen Cotton Club women sitting on the chairs, making them feel good like they were part of it, So Norma Jean says, ladies, I'd like to introduce you to Grant Reed, and they rolled their eyes when they saw me. They said, oh, we know him, honey. We don't want to meet him. So I asked my grandmother, why are these ladies so sour on me? She said, that's because when you was down at Chicken Bone Beach as a little boy in Atlantic City, you used to kick sand in their faces, and they still resented. But I was able to know those people.
Chicken Bone Beach.
Yeah. Chicken Bone Beach was the black section because they didn't want the black people in Atlantic City to be on any other parts of the beach.
Chicken Bone Beach.
Because Chicken Bone Beach.
We had the same thing in Reese Beach. I think it was number 7. We when we went out there as youngsters,